All right, so I'd like to start by asking the three of you briefly to just introduce yourselves and give us a little bit of background about your career and who you are and what you do now. And I'll just start with closest. Chip, if you go first.
Great. Chip Maxon, President, Chief Operating Officer of the Sacramento River Cats. I've been with the River Cats 12 years now. I've been in minor league baseball 20 or 21 years, and have moved around. This is the fifth team I've worked for. I was sharing with some of the guys. Grew up, have roots in Canton, Ohio. Grew up in the Chicago area. Didn't like the snow, didn't like the cold. Decided I wanted to move south and west, and so 5 years in Texas and Tennessee, 5 years in the Great Northwest, and now 12 years here in Sacramento.
Thanks, Chip. Ash?
Hi, my name is Ashley Bryant, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Three Strands Global Foundation, which is a nonprofit that focuses on combating human trafficking. And my career began actually in marketing communications, working for high-tech companies in Silicon Valley. But in 2008, when my good friend's daughter was trafficked, left my career and began the nonprofit and became one of the co-founders. So I've been doing that for the last 14 years. And previous to that was for almost 14 years doing marketing communications in the Valley.
Thanks, Ash.
Hi guys, I'm David Lott. I'm CEO of Abound Financial and son of an electrician, grandson of an alcoholic, and great-grandson of another alcoholic. And so my whole story is just kind of God redeeming. I think a lot of ours probably are, that process and hopefully creating something new for His glory. We've got about 700 customers across the United States. Many of those are in Northern California. We have 2 locations, and we do wealth management primarily for high net worth investors.
Awesome. Thank you, David, very
I've also
much.
got 6 kids and a 3-week-old. I'm married.
I'm never going to be as confident about having 4 now that you've told me you have 6. Okay, so I'd like to start with sort of a big, broad topic that I hopefully will interest everybody, which is leadership and strategy. And I'm going to ask you to sort of narrow this down. What's the biggest single challenge you think about leading an organization? So we'll go in reverse order, David, if that's okay, if we can pick on you.
I think for me, and I don't know if this is true for all CEOs because everybody's cut from a different cloth, but my personality is kind of more of a visionary. And so, unfortunately, having kind of a mind that thinks about the future and tries to create, a lot of times I end up being a bit self-focused. And you don't generally go from just school to being the boss. And so for me, I went from being, school to a contributor to more of like a individual sales person. And then I went from kind of being a lone wolf to trying to run a team. And so I'd say the biggest challenge is learning and growing my skill set on how do I build a team around me who is more empathetic than I am, who can help me do what I say that I'm going to do and think about other people and care for other people and build culture in a way that really wants the team and the group to move forward together and feel invested in.
That's fantastic. Thanks. Ash?
Yeah, I think for me, people are different. Everybody is different, and you got to meet them where they're at. And that's just, sort of over these 14 years plus even before, I think that it's about, like you, I'm a visionary. That's that piece that I'm the one who's always thinking of the innovative next thing. But I've learned over the time that I have been a CEO that I really have to listen for understanding as a good leader. And I also need to meet all of our staff where they're at so that I can encourage, and through encouragement of who they are and what they're working on, then we actually get the best out of that person. And culturally, then everybody is trying to meet the goals and to be able to achieve, as the agency wants to end trafficking, then it's something that we can focus on and have that purpose in doing that. So I think it's not only being reflective of how can I be the best leader for the staff that work at Three Strands, but also how do I really meet each person where they're at. So that's what I would say.
Great, thank you.
And I have one daughter, but I have her with me tonight on my sock. So Yeah, baby JoJo's with me. Man, you guys nailed it. And as you're talking, I was thinking about the self-starting and trying to learn myself. And I remember the first time my boss came to me and she said, it's time for you to step up and be more vocal. And then I started realizing it's about other people and how do I try and get the best out of them. And I think that all comes down to communication, because again, I'm a visionary and I always have ideas, but I've gotten myself in trouble when I just share idea after idea after idea. Andy Stanley, a pastor in Georgia, great podcast. Andy Stanley says, leaders are repeaters. And I've taken that to heart these last few years, especially coming post-pandemic. Pre-pandemic, I had a great leadership team. They'd been with me for 5, 6, 7 years. A lot of change, a lot of transition these last couple years. New people. I've had to go back and try and rebuild our culture, and that means repeating some of the same things. I'm learning business cycles, right? You have to go back every 6 or 7 years and kind of start over and repeat. So I think that communication people is actually pointed out, listening, understanding where they're at. How do you communicate to individuals? How do you make sure the message doesn't just get heard by people like you, but people that are different from you? And so that's been my challenge. I don't want to slow down and repeat, but it's so important to do that.
Great, thanks, Chip. So each of you just mentioned being, as a personality trait, being visionary. And so my question is this: how do you translate your vision into something that can be implemented? Obviously, we all know all three of your organizations are tremendously successful, but how do you take that vision and make it something other people can chew on and do something with?
Make it simple and clear, easy to follow. I mean, again, that's, I'm laughing a little bit as you're asking that question, because I'm thinking about all the times I've had a great idea, but we were not able to execute on it because I wasn't able to simplify it and make it clear so that someone else could see my vision, right? Back to that communication piece. And I've told my staff over and over and over again, simple and clear, simple and clear, simple and clear. If it's not intuitive, we lose people. And so that's been a big thing for us, is just to try and slow down, make things simple so that our staff can understand it and they can execute on it. If we can't execute in an excellent way, we don't want to do it.
Great, thanks, Chip.
I think God has given us all, talents. And a lot of times, they're two sides of the same coin. So that visionary thing can be a huge blessing, and it can help grow a company. It can also, bite you, right? And you can be a visionary that's like, building things up. You can also be a fire starter, and you're just burning everything down because you're just lighting a match to everything you see. And so what I've found is trying to build the right team involves taking people whose God-given gifts augment my God-given gifts. And so as I'm walking down, the meeting or just the street, and I'm just throwing ideas up in the air, I need to have a team member that's going to be catching all those ideas to bring them back in front of me to tell me, hey, what are our priorities? You mentioned this, this, and this. Does this still matter? And I think as visionaries, it's easy to just keep coming up with new ideas, but having somebody, what I would call an operator, who's going to come in and help you organize those ideas and bring them back in front of you so you can prioritize and execute, and then help, maybe speak the language of people who aren't the visionary, what I'd call a processor, so that we can actually get this all the way, not just into the red zone, but like into the end zone.
Wonderful, thank you.
I think, for a nonprofit, your vision is everything, right? It is a world free from human trafficking. That's huge. How do we actually have a world free from human trafficking? And how do we get 37 people and an agency to actually deliver on that? So for us and for me, being a visionary, it's the culture is key in a nonprofit because it's hard work. And if we are working without impact, then why are we doing it? Right? And so, I can have all the ideas and throw them all out there as a visionary, but I have learned over my career actually not to do that. I think them in my head. I might bounce them off of Ray. Those of you know I'm married to him. But maybe do that, but not to actually throw them at my staff. To be really purposeful and intentional around, okay, here are these different ideas and what actually falls within that mission and that vision of what it is we're trying to deliver on. Because if it's outside of that, then I probably shouldn't be actually doing it, right? So it's really slow to go fast. Build, measure, learn, right? All of that, all those pieces that we talk about. But I think as a visionary, I've had to put the brakes on more often than not because I could burn everything down, right, in a hot second. So just really staying focused on what is that vision, being intentional around building up staff so that we deliver on it with impact.
That's great. David, I have a feeling next time Ashley bounces the ideas off me, visionary fighter starter as a term may come back up.
Arsonist is another word.
I'll have to play it by ear. Okay, so let me shift gears on you. Let's talk about, we're standing here at Jessup University, we're all here for a specific reason. How do you, across financial services, sports, and a nonprofit, integrate your faith with your leadership and your day-to-day work?
Can I just take like a little bit longer to answer that question than we have?
Take your time. We got it.
Because I just want to kind of give you guys the background to this, because for me, this is probably the most important question of the night. So pre-COVID, we'll go with that. Pre-COVID, I kind of lived this life where, wasn't walking with the Lord for a long time. 2016, I really decided, you know what, I really actually believe this and I'm going all in. And what that looked like was a journey, but it started with me just kind of, doing the things of tithing and all that type of stuff, reading my Bible for the first time, like actually reading it. It's kind of I think a lot of Christians might not do that. I didn't. And so, I kind of started growing this faith. I was getting discipled, but that was really like a Sunday and when I was waking up and drinking my coffee type of thing. And I was trying to learn, how do I be this person like past 7 a.m., okay? Like I'm trying to get to that, like 1 o'clock even. But on a work phone call or in a work meeting, particularly with people that I know are not on board with Jesus, I was not that guy. I compartmentalized that. I was really making business decisions. And when COVID hit, I saw all these churches shut down, and I was feeling really angry about that. I'm like, where is trusting God? Like, this is supposed to be the center place of trusting God, or centerpiece of that. And I saw them making business decisions. And so I was actually driving by a church, and I felt like God told me, you're right, but you better not be making business decisions if you're going to hold them to that standard. And I was like, whoa, okay. And so that's when I decided, you know what, we're just going to go all in. And I didn't really know what that looked like at first, but I ended up joining a group called Convene, which was a Christian CEO peer-to-peer group, and I started getting ideas. And since then, I said, you know what, I don't really even know what the rules are about praying at work, but I'm just going to start like asking for prayer requests in team meetings. And I don't really know what the rules are like with praying for customers, but if somebody's parents just died, I'm going to ask them if they want me to pray for them. And then we started a chaplaincy thing. And then we started putting Bible verses in our newsletters. And then we just started kind of like promoting this whole thing and our core values being based on Jesus. And now I feel like God's really said, hey, you know what? There's an opportunity for you to be who you are all the time, and your environment changes, but you don't. And I always respected people, like back in the day, I grew up on the East Coast. Darryl Green was a wide receiver for the Redskins, like when you guys were probably born. And he would kneel in the end zone, and that was like a thing. Now it's like Tim Tebow. But just like that person who doesn't need to stand up for Jesus is not a pastor, but just like has decided, you know what, I am in this role because this is my calling. I might not be a pastor, but I believe God has called me to do this thing. And so if I'm serving him in his kingdom, I better, it might make sense to acknowledge that and to be doing that all the time.
Yeah, so for me, again, bring it back to what it is that we're doing as an agency is combating one of the most heinous crimes, right, on the planet. And so I left my career, but I left it very prayerfully because I really believe that God's called me to the work that I'm doing. And I've always said to our board of directors, if there's ever a point in time where Ashley shouldn't be the CEO of this agency, then I am happy to be able to step aside, because I know God's put me here with my gifts, my talents, the things, the person he's wired me to be. And if that time comes, I'm good with it, whatever that is. But until that time, until he calls me somewhere else, or that someone says, yeah, it's that time, tap you on the shoulder, then I'm going to be really on my knees often, because again, when we think about what happens with this crime, I could not do what I do without absolutely 100% knowing that God's in control. And for that matter, someday when I go home to be with Jesus, and I'll have 100 million questions, but a lot of them I know will be asked, all of those things had to happen in order for this and this and this to happen. There was a plan, I know that intuitively as a believer, but I think that sometimes when the realness of someone walking through the door who's escaping an abuser in tears with, clothes that are wet and no food and no place to sleep, that space of, Lord, okay, I got to remember there's a plan, because right now in front of me, I don't see that plan, and all I see is hurt. And so it's constantly being in a place to say, okay, Lord, give me the strength, give me the words, give me the vision, give me whatever it is, because I seriously, as the human standing here, can't do any of it unless you actually give me that guidance. So that's where my faith plays every day.
Great stuff. And Ray, thank you so much for bringing this question up. I think, I hope what's shared on this question sticks with everybody here tonight, because this is, it's why we're here, right? And I go back, sports, it's interesting. I love sports, it's fun. I got into baseball, I was playing baseball, looked in the mirror, realized I was done growing, I was sharing with these guys, I'm not as big as them, but thought if I could work at a ballpark. So it was all about fun, and that's what I wanted. And once I got into sports, I started realizing my very first day, my very first internship, I was the new guy. And I remember they said, okay, we've got a dirty job. We need somebody to volunteer. We're not going to tell you what it is. I said, I'm the new guy. I'll do it. Well, it was digging a trench to lay conduit for a new scoreboard at this ballpark. And it was June in Chicago, so it was muddy and nasty. And I'm out there digging this on my first day thinking, okay, maybe working at a ballpark is not so glorious. And a gentleman walks up, way too short of shorts. I'm like, who's this guy? He ends up being the team's general manager. He ran the franchise. He said, I heard it's your first day. You volunteered. Thank you. I'll dig this trench with you. And he started talking about the impact, how he was asked to speak at different events like this throughout the community. And the Lord gave me a vision, right, of how a career can put us on a pedestal, a platform that we have a way bigger voice than we have on our own. Nobody's here tonight to see David or Ashley or Chip. You're here because of the careers we're involved in and the influence that we have. And so that hit me that first day, and I wanted that type of influence. And so as I've gone through my career in sports, I'm blessed, there's an organization called the Daniel Summit. It's sports executives, a gentleman that's now running the Arizona Cardinals one day. He's like, we should all get together. We feel like we're on an island. The enemy tries to isolate us and attack us and pick us off because we're in a secular world. Let's get together and have accountability and fellowship. And so we do that every year. So that's a fantastic group that I've latched onto and again, get together with people that are leading teams throughout the country and to pray and sing and cry together. It's awesome. And it's called the Daniel Summit for a reason. And this I go back to so often in my career. This has been my cornerstone for faith and influence in business. Daniel was plucked from his home, right? He was taken as a captive, put into Babylon, a very sinful, secular part of the world. And he was said, essentially a slave, you're going to serve the king. But Daniel knew, he said, I'm not going to compromise in certain areas. My food, my prayer life, and then his accountability partners, his brothers that he was there in bondage with them. But he said, I'm going to serve where God has put me in this very secular part of the world. And Daniel was 10 times better than anybody else. So let me hear this. I get frustrated when Christian business leaders start making excuses. And they say, because of their faith or their religion, they don't want to do something difficult. I'm like, no. God has not called us through the easy walk. Like what you all are doing, what you all are going to do. There's going to be challenges, there's going to be temptations and struggles because you're trying to serve the Lord and the enemy doesn't want you to. So Daniel said, nope, I'm going to be 10 times better. He was the best by far. He was second in command, influence in an entire nation, and led a king to the Lord. That's influence, right? People tried to take him down, but he stayed focused on what he wanted to do. And so I have teams reach out to me. My mom will laugh. My mom's here from Chicago tonight. Hi, Mom. Grew up in a very conservative part of the country, and I remember I said, I want to run a team someday, and somebody said, okay, but you're a Christian, are you going to serve alcohol? And I just kind of laughed. I was like, okay, I'm not going to get hung up on that. I'm going to move beyond that, and I'm going to look at how I can influence whether or not we serve alcohol at the ballpark. I want to see how we can influence our community in a good way. I've had teams reach out to me again in Arkansas and Texas, say, well, do you guys do Pride Night? We're not sure if we should do that. And I bring up Daniel to them. I said, let me tell you this. I don't necessarily know the right or wrong answer, but here's what I know. I'm put here in California. I'm embracing the people around me. And my job is to serve them and to lead and to point to the Lord anytime that I can. And so there's things we have to wrestle with in different positions that we're put in. And let me just wrap it up with this. I try and be purposeful about my faith. We were acquired by the Sacramento Kings organization a year and a half ago. I'm not able to lead with Bible verses or start the day in prayer, right? I'm not able to do that. But I share with all of our event staff, all of our ushers, parking, whenever they start, I share my story. Inclusion means people getting to know you, right? If we want to be an inclusive organization, if I let them know who I am, more than the 10% that they see, if I let them know the other 90%, hopefully that inspires them to share their story and they feel welcome. And I talk about a single parent mom on welfare raising 3 boys and her faith, her hard work, and her focus. Excuse me. If you weren't here, this is easier. But her focus on education. So I lead with, everybody hears me say those 3 things, that faith was important to my family, and that leads to conversations. A couple years ago, I went to Uganda doing clean water missions. When people asked about, oh, you went to Africa, what'd you do? Oh, I went with my church, clean water wells. Everybody agrees that getting people out of bondage, getting clean water to people in our world is so important, and they want to hear that story. And so I believe we need to look, as believers, look for opportunities to share our influence, our faith. And I say it's like fishing. I cast it out there. Sometimes people don't bite. Oh, okay, great, and they go on to something else. Other times people say, hey, you mentioned something about your faith, and they want to have a deeper conversation. And that's the magic. That's the power. That's God at work.
Wow, thank you. That's fantastic. Thank you, all 3 of you. It's just amazing.
Can I just add something to that?
Of course you can, David, yeah.
I think
this is your show, not mine.
there's risk. So I think that's like an important, depending on, regardless of how far you take it, like taking it anywhere, there's risk. And so I think walking with Jesus, you got to be ready to say, I'm going to acknowledge you, and I'm going to trust that you're going to acknowledge me before my Father in heaven, or your Father in heaven, and you're going to take care of me. And the financial piece of it, I'm going to trust that you are going to take care of. Like, I've lost hundreds of thousands of dollars personally for speaking up, but God's also repaid that back and grown manyfold, So there is a risk, and that's the Christian walk. And it's not just in business, it's every day. Like, if you're going to take it outside of the walls of comfort, then you better expect to have pushback, And the question, is it worth it? Like, of course it's worth it. That's why we're all here, But I just want to acknowledge that it's not all rainbows and unicorns. You have to decide, like, I really believe this. It's not just, some song I like to sing from Maverick City, you know what I mean?
Yeah, go.
I just want to say one thing.
Yeah, please.
So in the work that we do at Three Strands, we do lots of advocacy and lots of legislative work. And I'll never forget one time where we wrote a bill that mandated prevention education in the schools. And you would think that child welfare would have been behind that bill, and they were absolutely positively not behind that bill. And the reason was that, well, there was lots of political reasons, but anyway, they weren't behind the bill. And I remember thinking it didn't make any sense and praying about it constantly. Lord, just help me to know what to say in these meetings with child welfare as they continue to oppose this legislation, which really seems like it would be good not only for kids, right? But best, Lord, you just kind of, and I mean, even in the midst, as you say, I literally had a woman with her finger in my face, so close to my face, I thought she was really going to touch it, screaming at me at the top of her lungs about why this was not a good bill. And I was so calm because it was, okay, Lord, you know what? You've got it. And I prayed about it. I was constantly praying about it. And so there was no fear. There was only, for me, hey, these are the reasons that we're having this bill. This is why we think it would be important. No matter how close your finger gets to my face, I'm actually going to remain calm. And in that, people watched, right? There are people in that room who are like, I don't know how that happened. Well, let me tell you how that happened, right? So those are those opportunities.
So if I can build on what David and Ashley, what you guys just both said, it applies to all three of you, of course, but it's tough, right? And we are confronted with tough decisions. We're confronted with ethical dilemmas. Leaders are put in those positions, if not daily, certainly frequently. What advice do you have for the audience in sort of how do you deal with that? What is are there specifics? Is there specific, prayers, scriptures, self-talk exercises? What is it that you guys do in that moment? And if I can ask, and please take this as voluntary, is there a specific example you could share? I mean, Ash, you just did, but is there a specific example you guys could share about that?
I think it starts, you have to be purposeful in business and in your faith. And David, I love you sharing about your recommitment, the morning prayer time, the morning Bible study, the discipleship. Discipleship is so, so important. I was blessed to be discipled with a group of guys in college and completely changed my life. And it's led to that discipline, being purposeful, up at 5 a.m, get my coffee before I'm on my phone. I get my Bible and my journal out, and I'm going through that. And I've started getting into a pattern of getting on my knees and elbows. I heard Meb Keflebsky, a famous runner, talked about hitting his knees and elbows, and said, you know what, that's humility. And so I try and start my day that way to prepare for what's to come. Prior to Sacramento, I remember I was a young, hotshot sales guy, and my career was taking off, and I was promoted, literally intern to VP in 3 years. And I take this new job, and I move up to Tacoma, Washington, and we're gonna build a new ballpark up there, and everything's great. And I remember it was Good Friday. It was leading into Good Friday. I told my sales staff, and our season started the week after Easter. I told my sales staff, it's like, okay, hey, I'm going to take the morning off, go to a service. If any of you, want to take time off for Good Friday, you're more than welcome to do that. And we had a Jewish guy, and he would take some of the Jewish holidays, and so it wasn't unique, right, that I was giving people some religious flexibility. And I remember Easter Sunday, I get a text from our president, and he calls essentially all the VPs together for a 7 a.m. meeting Monday morning. And we get in there, and he starts ranting and raving. He's not happy, and he looks at me. And he said, how could you give people off the Friday, the biggest sales day, right before our season starts? Nobody else took time off that day. I was back in the office that afternoon. It was our biggest sales day the entire year. So he starts coming after me. And I said, hold on, and I said, look, it was a great day. Nobody took time off. And he's like, I don't care. And I'll paraphrase, F you, F your religion, get the F out of here. And I walked out of that meeting, and again, I was so angry. And I had worked with this guy in Dallas, and I couldn't believe he had betrayed me like this, because he had questions. He had asked me questions about his faith, and I knew what he was going through personally at the time, and I couldn't believe it, and I grabbed my computer, and I was never gonna go back. And I remember I called another mentor, and I was getting ready to lawyer up and go, I mean, that's my flesh, right? My anger, I'm like, I'm getting revenge, I'm going after him. And it was such sound advice, and I think mentors is another thing. Like, make sure you have wise counsel, people you can talk through things to help you, guide you through, especially new things and situations like I was going through. And I remember Brent was this gentleman's name, and he said, hey man, I know you're a Christian. Brent wasn't. And he's like, I know you're a Christian. Why don't you take some time, pray about this, go for a walk. He's like, if you want to take action, I'll help you. And he was right, and he knew me. And I went for a walk, and I prayed, and I was just like, no, I'm not called to leave. I'm put here for a reason. And this is my challenge. This is my obstacle, and how am I going to respond? And I walked back in that afternoon. I walked right into his office, sat down. I was like, we got to talk. You can't talk to me like that again. We need to get on the same page. If we're going to run this company, be successful, this is how our relationship needs to be. And we ended up mending that, and he apologized, and we were able to work through it. Our relationship, candidly, was never the same. But years later, he was going through a bad divorce, and he took me to coffee, and he said, hey, like, can I even be a Christian if I'm going through a divorce? Like, our church is kicking me out. And I said, let me tell you this. After all, and I'm thinking, thank you, Lord. Thank you for not letting my anger boil up and ruin this opportunity. And I was just able to say, hey man, look, if our God is a sovereign God, he cares way more about our eternal well-being than our present circumstance. And so I said, so if what you're going through right now, even this challenge at your church, gets you on your knees before him and you seek him above church, above God, above church, above work, above everything else, I said, then praise God for what you're going through, because you're going to be with him for eternity. I'll say that again. Our sovereign, all-loving God cares more about our eternal well-being than our present circumstance. And I'm so thankful I was able to share that and let God work through that situation.
Amazing. Thanks, Chip.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm thinking specifically about an example. We have to make decisions all day long, and sometimes, you know, in those moments I talked about earlier, being a visionary, I have to pause, and even with decisions, right, to be able to pause. Okay, Lord, what should I be doing at this moment? My grandma used to always say she was always having a talk with Jesus, like in her head. She was always doing that. And as a child, I remember thinking, what is she talking about that she's having conversations in her head? Well, she was really praying, just, you know, sometimes out loud, not always. But I realize about myself that in all situations, no matter where I am in a meeting, or if I'm in a heated discussion, and someone's coming at me, like the example I used earlier, that I am praying during those times because it grounds me, right? And my faith is the outward expression of who Jesus is should come through me. And I'm not perfect by a long shot. But I'll give you an example that happened early on at Three Strands. So Three Strands Global Foundation was actually not the original name of Three Strands. It actually was Run for Courage. And early on in the nonprofit, the first couple years, we had another nonprofit actually file a trademark patent lawsuit against us because of the word courage. And I'll never forget, you were talking about wise counsel, one of the most, just a dear friend and wise counsel, I called, and I was really tearful. We had made all sorts of branding and marketing, and Caitlin, we were talking about that today, right? All this stuff that we had done and doing, right? But God had another plan. And through my tears, my flesh was definitely showing, my friend very wisely said, run the opposite direction. Just turn and run the opposite direction. And this is someone who I knew was grounded in his faith. And so I did turn, and there was no lawsuit. We just gave everything. We just gave it all. Gave it all to this organization. The website, the branding, the marketing, everything. It would have taken us hundreds of thousands of dollars, which, again, going back to the vision that I talked about before and the mission, if I'm about ending human trafficking, I'm not about this other place where I've got to spend a year and a half and over $150,000 to combat that lawsuit, right? I need to actually take a breath, really pray about it. So anyway, all of that to say that in these places as believers, we get into situations where God's planted us for a reason. And we have to be able to ask for him to really help us, to give us his vision, his eyes, to be able to see what decisions we should make. And they're not always, sometimes our flesh comes into that. But in those moments where I 100% know that God is going before me because I've actually really been deliberate and intentional to ask for that. And then I have this I don't have any fear at all. I have that confidence, approach the throne of grace with confidence. Man, that's exactly what I'm doing every single day. Lord, this is my intention. Is this actually your intention, right? And if it's not, close those doors. If it is, open those doors. Bring people in front or behind or alongside me to make it super clear the path that I should be on. And I think that as leaders, that we're constantly on our knees and we are constantly asking for that help in that direction, because otherwise we know that alone and by ourselves that we wouldn't be able to be in the positions or in the influential places that we are without actually leaning in and really leaning on Him in every turn.
I think that one of the most fundamental things that changed my perspective, being somebody who tends to be self-focused, is this idea that I actually believe that God's plans for me are better than my plans for me. And so, what does that mean? That decisions that I make or circumstances that happen that maybe I don't want, like when it talks about His plans for me are good. And it's not like everybody, He's not necessarily His plans for everybody are good, right? It's like those who are following Him, those who are called according to His purposes. So if I know that in my heart that I'm doing the best to surrender myself and walk in His kingdom as His subject and servant, then I can know His plans are good. So that's the starting point. And then I think that before you get to, some big decision, I was taught to, why don't you just try acknowledging God in a day-to-day decision? You want to buy a big screen TV. What? Maybe pray about it. Maybe you have the money. It's not a money thing. God, what do you think about this big screen TV? That sounds insane maybe, but when you start to involve, when I was growing up in a Christian home, okay, oh, David, God is that still small voice. Okay, well, the only time I heard that still small voice is when I'm making bad choices, right? So, how about when I want to make a good choice, And so I think practically, if you just start acknowledging God in your decision-making process and saying, hey, look, I'm going to gather, there's a good book wrote called Sacred Pace. It's you gather facts, you consult with wise counsel, you look at circumstances, and then you get neutral, and you really say, all right, God, what do you want from me? One of my mentors, his family wanted a boat, and he had the money to buy the boat. The end of the story is somebody gave him a boat, So I think that's kind of silly, but I can assure you that you will hear more from God as you start to recognize His voice by giving Him opportunities, giving Him the room to actually speak to you on a particular issue. Then by the time you get to a big decision, an ethical dilemma, you're already tuned in to hearing what He has. And by that point, are probably trying to not make it about you. You're trying to say, hey, God, this is about you, man. Help me understand what you want me to do.
Wonderful. Amazing answers. Thank you to all of you. Okay, so I'd like to do one last sort of formal question, then we're going to turn it over to Q&A. One piece of advice that you would give soon-to-be graduates that, from whatever perspective you choose, just one thing you think that, looking back might have been the piece of advice that you wished or something that you would wish for your kids or whatever it is. So one piece of advice, and then we'll start, taking questions.
Don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to fail. It's so important. Don't be afraid to pick up the phone and have a conversation with someone when it's a hard, crunchy conversation, I call it. You just, those moments where you're like, oh man, I just totally blew that. Okay, so what did I learn from it, right? What's God teaching me through this? Because I think that is super important, and yeah, it really comes down to that. Don't be afraid to fail, for sure.
When I was just talking to some of you guys at the beginning, I'm getting nervous because there's so much pressure. I mean, I'm 39, so I wasn't just in college, but I was in that spot, right, trying to figure it. My parents wanted me to get a job. I wanted to get a job. I wanted to do my own thing, and there is so much pressure in that. I'm asking some of the guys I'm talking to, so what do you want to do with your life, kind of thing, and they're probably I don't have any idea. I'm an accountant student. I don't really even know what that means, in the real world, And so I think that what I've learned is that God will show you, so the Bible says he's a lamp unto our feet and a light unto our path, right? So he's not a tractor beam where we're going to know what like decision 12 is on our journey. What I found is that he will tell us the next thing to do. So when you think about leaving school and finding that job, I would just focus on what do you think God has next for you? And it might even just be like, who should you talk to next? Not even like what you're going to do. Because there's this, I just found that like there's that the devil's in the details type of expression. But what I mean by that is like step 2, 3, 4, and beyond, you have no control over. And when you think that you do and you try to like process, well, what am I going to do next? And what happens then? And what happens then? You're just going to stress and burn yourself out. So my encouragement to you, even when, it hits the fan or things aren't going your way, whatever, like if you just focus on what am I supposed to do next? I can assure you that if you're asking the Lord, he's going to tell you. And you just let the rest of it go and be trusting that he's going to give you that next step after that, you're going to save yourself so much stress.
Yeah, I love both of those, and Ashley, you're making me think about, I use the analogy when we talk about being afraid to fail or just trying something new or going through tough times. Anybody in here lift weights? Do you lift weights by sitting there looking at the weight, or do you have to go through some pain? Right? We grow through times of adversity and pushing ourselves out of our comfort zones. So that's stealing yours. I'll come up with my own. I think it comes down to, like I said, with Daniel. Daniel was committed to being 10 times better than everybody else. He wasn't afraid of hard work. And look, there's so much that separates people today, but there is some cliches. We see people that come in and they want the corner office, within the first couple months, or they want big raises. But guess what? The people we're promoting, the people that we want to hire, we want to keep, that are getting the corner office, are the ones that are willing to put in the work. And let me say this, they're not afraid to be better than their peers, right? They see that as an opportunity. They put in the work, they read the books, they do the listen to the podcast after hours. So that's my advice. Look for opportunities to separate yourself, put in the work. What can you do to be 10 times better than anybody else, just like Daniel was?
Fantastic. Thank you, guys. Is looking at the weights an option? Because I could do that.
Hey, carrying babies or grandbabies helps too. That's weightlifting.
That's what I'm going to do, yeah. All right. So let's shift gears. Let's take questions from you guys. What questions do you have for any or all of our panelists? Yeah, Rachel.
Hi, I just had a question. So I was wondering, how can you tell if you're supposed to work in a business or start your own business? Like how were you able to figure that path out?
Great question, Rachel. Okay. So I shared with you that I began my career in marketing communications, was working in the Valley and doing that, and my good friend's daughter was trafficked, and it really, I could not stop thinking about what had happened and praying about what was my role. And so I think, really being intentional around, Lord, what is that? As David just said, what is that next step? Who do I need to talk to? Who are the people that I need to have in my life to figure out is I need to start my own business, or do I need to actually, go and work for a company? And I really believe, for me, it was clear, like, Ashley, you're supposed to be running this nonprofit. That's actually what I have designed you for this place. And when I don't want you there anymore, then I'll take you out of that place. But it was really clear for me. And so I would just encourage you to really pray about it and talk to lots of people who have started businesses and those who just decided not to, maybe, people who have been in a company for 20 years, and get lots of data from lots of different people, because that will help you as you are sort of thinking through and processing, and then just continuing to pray about it so that God will really make that path clear for you. Because starting a nonprofit, I mean, we have 16,000 nonprofits in Sacramento. Don't start a nonprofit just because. Go find out does something exist first. Can I actually be a part of something that already is doing good work, right? I mean, people who ask me that question all the time, I'm like, no, just hold on, go and look and see what others are doing, and then pray about it and see, you know? So anyway, that's my answer.
Thanks. Other questions? Ken, you got it.
Hey guys, so awesome talk. It's really enlightening. You guys are successful in your careers, and God has clearly paved that path for you. And I know there's been some struggles. You know, this wasn't an overnight thing. I love what you said about don't be afraid to fail. I firmly believe they're the building blocks of success. The faster you fail, the faster you win, guys. So getting to where you are, there's success, and there are times where I imagine there's comfort and there's trust a lot in your abilities and yourself. God is a jealous God, and he has an MO. He likes to glorify himself. My question is, what has been a time or an event where, despite all your abilities, despite everything, all your credentials, everything that you brought to the table and you could have brought, there was just no way for either something to happen, and it was clearly God that made the way?
I feel like you know the answer to the question based on how you asked it. Just teasing you a little bit, but I mean, nothing that I've done that's any good has been anything that's for me. You know, this is kind of an answer to the other question at the same time. Like, anything that I've tried to make happen, like that I forced, that I thought was a good idea and I'm just gonna like send it, did not work. Just did not work. Trying to change jobs, make more money, trying to come up with new ideas. Like, one of the ways that we grow our business has been acquiring other practices like ours. I try to go and network and spend a bunch of money and time and effort and blah, blah, blah. Personal life, same thing. Everything that has happened to me, God has pretty much put it on my lap. You know, I just, like Daniel, try to take care of what God has given me, like, you know, tend that field, and just try to say, all right, God, I'm going to do the best I can with what you've given me, and if you give me more, great, but, you know, I'm your servant, so you're going to give me talent, you're going to take it away, you can use it, you can waste it, it's up to you. You know, I'm just going to show up every day and do my best, and that's how anything good has happened. So, you know, I haven't even gotten close to, like, succeeding on my own, you know, strength to tell you what getting to the end of my rope, because I already gave up, you know, before that, and just was like, all right, this is too much. I just need to stay in my lane.
Yeah, I think it goes back to, really, I mentioned, you know, my mom, single parent mom, raising 3 boys. You know, she was welfare, cleaning toilets at night in a warehouse, going to school during the day, trying to make ends meet. And that's my background, right? That's the kid I was. I don't think I ever had a new pair of Nikes until I was in high school. I would always wear hand-me-downs. I had a ton of insecurities. I never saw myself in this position. My mom and I were having a conversation on the way over here about how God has just changed so much in our lives over the years. And so I go back to really the opportunity to go to college, to be in your shoes. Thankfully, my mom was deemed the graduate school at Olivet Nazarene University at that time. She finished her degree. Again, hard work. If you remember what I mentioned about her, hard work, education, and faith. She believed God called her back to Olivet to finish her degree, going through hard times after failing with the divorce. A lot of these, you see in a lot of these same things in different stories, how God works. But that gave my brothers and I an opportunity to go to school and get our school paid for. So I think, what do we have now? 11 or 12 degrees for the price of one. My brother just got his 2nd doctorate from Vanderbilt this time. I'm like, how much smarter than me does he need to be? But God just provided, right? And then even when I was finishing, I was able to play baseball at Olivet and wanted to go work in professional sports. And was trying to figure out what was next for me, and actually I thought I had an opportunity with the Chicago White Sox. They changed the job. I was left there saying, oh no, what's next? What I planned, what I tried doing, my connections fell through. The Lord opened up an opportunity for me to go to Baylor for grad school, and it was completely, I missed all the deadlines, was able to connect with a guy. He had been involved with Fellowship of Christian Athletes. I was running Fellowship of Christian Athletes at Olivet at that time. He had played baseball at a small Christian school, was trying to get some research grants to add grad assistants at Baylor. He was able to get that done. I think I got the call in June, and we drove me down there in August of that year to start grad school, but got an assistantship. So again, my background, I couldn't afford college or grad school on my own. I got college paid for, I got grad school paid for, and then just through networks, opening up doors for me to do additional internships. I remember I was looking at my first job, and I'm like, oh, I wanted to go to Albuquerque. The mountains were great. A Midwest kid, I'd never seen mountains before, but it came down to finances. I couldn't afford that. Opened a door for an opportunity in Dallas. They were paying a little bit more. I could afford living there, and so took that job, and that just opened up the doors for so much. So I've seen God along the way through so many steps. Let me say this, David, too. I prayed about a gym, right? Working out, I worked at a gym during grad school. When I got an internship, I was getting $600 a month. Couldn't afford a gym, had my truck payment. I prayed about a gym. I prayed about something as silly as a place to work out. 2 weeks into the internship, hey, Rhodes College offered their gym up if anybody wants to go work out there. The apartment I was at was 2 blocks from Rhodes College. And so I think it's so true. Continue to give God opportunities. And over the course of my life, how many times have I looked back on, if God cares about a gym, how much more does he care about career, a wife, kids, things like that?
That's awesome. My example actually was just this last year. I shared that we do legislative work, and some of you might remember that SB 14 was making human trafficking a serious felony in the state of California for the very first time. And that doesn't seem, to all of us here, it seems like, well, yeah, of course, right? That's a no-brainer. But the reality is it didn't exist, that law in the books. And so I got a call from one of our staff members. Her dad was connected to Shannon Grove, who's a state senator, and he's like, Ashley, would you just go and talk to them? They want to do this bill, and California is so tough to be able to get this through the Public Safety Committee. I just don't know. And I remember driving downtown to the Capitol thinking, okay, Lord, the Public Safety Committee has not passed a bill out of the Public Safety Committee for 20 years, like 20 years. And so as I was driving, I thought, but you know what, Lord? You got me going to the Capitol to talk to Senator Grove about this. So, we're going to continue just going down this path. And I tell you what, after testifying and after committee, and made it through the public safety of the Senate, but then the Public Safety Committee of the Assembly, and we were praying beforehand, and they shut it down. And they said no. And I remember sitting there thinking, okay, Lord, this was the second time that Senator Grove brought this forward, but you've got a plan. No sooner did we walk out that door that Governor Newsom called Senator Grove and said, turn back around, go back in that room. We are not going to not have human trafficking as a serious felony in the state of California. And so from our governor, they turned right back around, the safety committee did. They re-voted, which obviously made it so it passed through, and the governor signed it, and it became a law. So, things like that, just 20 years where nothing has gone through a committee, but God is bigger than that, right? And just knowing that that's actually true and that we can stand firm on that is a big piece.
Fantastic, thank you. What other questions do we have? Oh, here we are.
In your professional opinion, how do the elements of innovation and even more specifically AI, how can that be used to impact the kingdom in our modern day?
I think that God has just really put a desire for excellence on my heart. There's a Bible verse about Daniel that talked about how he was put above everybody because of the excellence that he pursued. And so for me, that means just constantly evaluating what are we doing and can we do it better. Actually, Sam's here, he works with us, and I mean, that's something we're talking about all the time. And so when something like AI comes out, if we have the ability to do more, do better with fewer inputs, that's kind of a no-brainer, right? We started using AI to do simple stuff like, proofread and write newsletters and write scripts. Now we're using it to read tax returns and read insurance documents and model estate plans. So I think that I look at those types of things as tools on how can I do my very best for what God has called me to do. If that exists, if that's out there and that can enhance the level of excellence that I can bring to the people that God has called me to serve, then that's how I do it.
For us, it's a really important tool. So in our prevention education program, we have over 40,000 stories from teachers and counselors across the nation on three things: what's changed in their behavior, how they increase their knowledge, and how they increase their awareness. We wouldn't be able to read in a month or a year or years all of those stories if we didn't use AI as a tool for good, right? So by actually using it, we're able to see that over 70% of those 40,000 stories with 96% accuracy actually show behavior change, which is pretty cool. So knowing that teachers and counselors who are in the classroom are changing their behavior in order to make sure that they can identify human trafficking in their classroom is one of those tools for good.
I think similarly along the lines of excellence, as we look at it, everything from email communication, email marketing is so important for us. People get their information through our website and through email, and so how do we, working with AI email campaigns to continue to send messages out to folks who may be interested in purchasing tickets or plans or whatever. And that really just streamlines, it shortens our sales process. If somebody gets that email, raises their hand, says, yes, I'm interested, then our sales reps jump in that process. On the corporate sponsorship side, it's great for us to do research and find out what is, we're talking with Budweiser right now, what are they doing across the country in their partnership. So it helps us in just that research and gathering all that information quickly so we can understand it, help us as we put our presentations and pitch proposals together. Everybody wants things customized, right? We need to know, we need to listen to them, understand what they're looking for, and AI gives you all of that information in order to do that. I will say one caution. We've also enabled our staff, feel free to use AI appropriately. One caution: a year ago, we were doing an invitation, and one of our gals putting this event together, inviting some of our members out, and I see it, and I said, "What is that?" "Oh, that's the invitation for our upcoming event." And I was like, "That's for us?" It had the silhouette of a baseball player, great. It was green and black and gold. Whose colors are green, black, and gold? The Oakland A's, right? The River Cats were cardinal in black. And so our team just accepted what AI spit out without proofreading it or looking at it or going through brand standards, which are so important to us. And I was like, no, pull that back. We're not sending that out to anybody. We need our logo on there as well. AI didn't incorporate our logo. And so I think it's also important to make sure you continue to monitor AI, the product is putting out, not just rely on it for everything that we do.
Great, thank you very much, guys. Other questions? Who else?
I think Haley had a question up front.
Thank you. What do you guys recommend for people who are still kind of roped into their major, right? Still trying to figure out what's out there? What do you recommend for them to try and kind of work on during that time of I don't know what I'm doing?
I'll say quickly, just start working. And while you're in school, look for internships as well to gain experience. I was telling some of these guys down here, I was a double major in marketing and sport management. Fits my career, but I spend so much time now on legal documents, spreadsheets, finance, psychology. If you understand people, you know how to communicate and lead to them. If you know how to communicate with them. Communication is so important to our sales team. So I think it's one, you can learn so much after college as well. I get this from my mom. I'm a lifelong learner, and I encourage everybody to continue learning. So I think it's get the experience, learn as much as you can, start working in different avenues, and you'll see. If you haven't done personality tests, skill assessments, you know, the Myers-Briggs, I was raised on that, predictive index, DISC, Enneagram, that will help as well. If you're honest in those, that can help point you in certain directions. So I always encourage that.
Yeah, no, I ditto. I mean, internships, we have one intern right now. She's been with us for a year and a half, and she's done 4 different things, right? She's been in policy, she was doing social work internship, she was doing marketing, just to be able to see what it is that which area and direction that she wants to go. So I agree, just start, choose something and see what you enjoy.
Just maybe add one other thing. I would second all that, and then I'd say that probably the thing that will help you move through your career the most is how you're able to interact with people, like the soft skills. And the best place to learn that is go work at a restaurant for tips and just get beat up every day and have to bite your tongue when people treat you like trash. That is the number one and fastest way that you're going to learn how to influence and communicate with people and withhold your feelings, and that will translate indefinitely in your career.
Awesome, thanks. What else? Other question? Oh, here we go. You got it, Ken?
I guess this is more of a question for David. You were talking about how you decided to dive into faith and everything, and I guess I was just wondering, was there ever a point where either a time or event that happened that made you question if you actually wanted to do that, or if that is actually something you were serious about, and what made you keep going?
So I grew up in a Christian home. I talked about the whole alcoholic thing. That was not my dad. Fortunately, he knew the Lord. My parents too, or my mom too, excuse me. But growing up in church is almost, in some ways, a handicap because you don't know how good God is, So I get to being visionary, now I feel like I'm a rebel because I have 6 kids. But at that time, I was a rebel because I want to do my own thing. You can't tell me what to do. And I know about God, I know Jesus, and I know, John 3:16, but I know what, my plans for me are good, And so I spent many years doing my own thing and finding out that path was not a path that was, I was successful at work too. It wasn't even that. From a world's perspective, I was doing great, but inside I was broken. And so, fortunately, in meeting my wife and who did not know the Lord and kind of going to church and kind of thinking, when I grow up, I should probably be a Christian. That's kind of how I thought about things. And I got to a point where, I had kids, and now it's okay, well, if I screw my life up, I'm going to screw my life up, my wife's life up, my kids' lives up. I need to figure this out. And so I started kind of pursuing the Lord just a little bit, going to church a little bit. And I got to this point where, I had been partying so much and in a sales job, traveling, expensive budgets, doing all the things. And, but I had started reading the Bible, and so I went back to San Diego, and I was hanging out with my friends, day drinking in Pacific Beach. And I was like, yeah, my wife's like, hey, when are you coming home? This is 1 o'clock in the afternoon. We start at 9 a.m. or something like that. And, I'm having a good time, I'm just going to hang out for a couple more hours and then I'll come home, I'm even telling these guys about Jesus a little bit. And that was the next thing I remember. I'm trying to tell my wife where I am. I'm in a ditch and I can not talk. I can't form sentences. My kids are at my in-laws' house in downtown San Diego. My sister-in-law and my wife have to come try to find me. And I woke up the next morning on a beanbag chair in my in-laws' family room with so much shame. And I realized, I was like, holy crap, like I am not in control of my life like I thought I was. And if I keep pretending that I am, I'm gonna just end up in destruction. And I already had destroyed all sorts of relationships and other things, but I just let that go and keep moving forward. And so I had already tried that, and I realized that that was a dead end. And I had thought really highly of myself, like I can do this, I can do it. I'm smarter, I'm better, I'm whatever. And so that's where God really broke me. And I had been looking for mentors. I had been looking for all. They were nowhere to be found. And then I just decided, all right, God, I don't even know how to do all these rules. I'm not capable of following all these rules. So whatever this is, you're gonna have to help me because I can't physically do this. And so, we're just gonna go from there. And God has, brought mentors and discipleship and, a career and all these things, my family that have been amazing. And that, as he showed up for me, my faith has grown and grown and grown. The Jim's type of story. He keeps showing up in little ways. I have this unfair advantage in business now that I have so much faith in what God's doing. If he calls me to do something, I'll put it all on the line. I don't even care anymore. Because, okay, what's the worst case scenario? He's going to have something else for me. If this is really what he wants, I'll take risks. I'll do things that most people wouldn't do, So I don't know if that answers your question, but it started with not appreciating. It unfortunately took me walking away from the Lord to realize how good God was. And I think that the risk is that church can inoculate you from really actually knowing Jesus, because you show up every Sunday, you get just enough of a feeling, and then you don't feel it for the rest of the week, and then you show up again. It's like, man, I don't know. That I could keep going, but I'll leave it at that.
Fantastic. I think we have time for one, maybe two more.
I sure appreciate the servant's hearts that you guys all have. It's pretty awesome. How important as a CEO is personal character? How do you define it? How do you grow in your personal character?
Said no, I don't want to go first. It's so important. Look, there's so many opportunities to compromise, to cut corners. Every time you turn around, conversations, the drinks, the parties. I've seen infidelity, all around, and then people talking about it like it's like everybody's doing it. It's the world. There's no bounds to the world, right? You can do anything, and people are doing everything. So I think that personal character is so important. And I go back again to Daniel. I go back to Scripture so often, because it's not just Daniel. You look at so many of the characters in the Bible. You look at Joseph and his character and integrity and how it seemed to lead him to a bad spot. But again, God was working through all that, took him to a point of surrender, the lowest spot, those moments of shame. I have my moment of extreme shame too. And then God lifts you up, and it's beautiful. So that's not answering your question, but I think it's important to look back at Scripture. And that's what I try and do. And so that when I'm in moments, I'm able to lead with character integrity. My staff knows what decision I'm going to make, because now I want to empower my team to make decisions. And if they know me, they know my character, they know what decision I would make, that's going to help them in those moments as well. That character itself, character and culture are so contagious. And it can take people in a good direction, or it can take people in a very bad, sour, dysfunctional direction. So it's so important, and I try to guard my heart all the time. I'll try to meet with other CEOs, and there's different groups that meet for lunch, but I'll try and meet one-on-one. One of the gentlemen I used to meet with regularly was Eric Hogue, used to be the Chief Development Officer here. My mom babysat him when he was a boy, so we knew each other from early age. But I could have hard conversations with Eric. Another gentleman, Judd Riggs, CEO of Tiker Construction, huge construction company. He'll take time to have coffee with me, and we'll sit and we'll talk about our faith and the hard decisions that come in business. So I try and guard my heart by being purposeful about meeting with other men of God who run businesses as well?
I think character is so important. It truly is. And I think that it's hard as a CEO, especially for me, to be able to find, I can find mentors and people I can talk to, but other CEOs who you can share with and be honest with and vulnerable with doesn't always happen. At least for me as a woman, that hasn't. I've had to seek it out a lot, and I don't know if that's partially. That women aren't in those roles as much, and so therefore there aren't those types of groups that exist that are just for women. But I've found that a lot of the mentors that I have had that are CEOs have been men rather than actually women. And so I think that when we think about character, especially as a woman, I think it's important to be able to have other women to be able to talk about what does character mean and what is integrity, and when I make a decision, you make decisions like nobody's watching you. The decision you make when someone's watching you should be the same as if someone wasn't watching you, right? And that character is going to, in all of your career, be something that someone does see. God in your life and the character that you display is so important. And I think for our staff, who's mostly female, which is actually in the social services side, I think how I show up and the character that I have, they actually depend on, right? They depend on how I'm going to respond. Because okay, we know who Ashley is, we know who her faith is in her life, we know who God is in her life. And so that's that example that they're going to say, okay, you know what, she made that decision because of this, this, this. Even if they aren't believers, right? That character matters. So.
I think the Bible talks all sorts in all sorts of places about character, right? You've got pride on one side, you've got humility on the other. Liars, integrity, and so I think there are certain character qualities that come easy to us. And then on the other side, we talked about the other side of the coin, the other side of what God has given us as a gift, the devil can use, right? And so I think knowing yourself and learning what are the things that you're going to really have to ask the Lord for you to help develop. Like for me, it's humility. It's embarrassing to say that, but that's the truth. And so I think if you are trying to walk with the Lord and you're trying to emulate Jesus, just looking at, all right, well, who was he? How did he act? And then, as you grow in your momentum of trusting God, like I just think of a recent thing. It gets kind of fun because we had a situation where we had been using a recruiter to hire our staff. And, more and more, we're kind of like, hey, we're kind of like Chick-fil-A, we talk about Jesus and there's rules that we have to go on, but we let people know, we're trying to serve people as Jesus does. And so, there's character qualities and certain things that we're interested in as a result of that. And our recruiter, she just wanted to hire somebody. That's how she gets paid. And that worked for a while, and we got some great people out of that. But I just was feeling like God was wanting us to just more trust him. And I was like, but how am I going to source? I need employees. How am I going to source these people, if I don't have a recruiter? I don't, And we were looking for a person to fill a position in Chico. And we really needed that. We were kind of pressure from customers. We took over this business. 3/4 of the staff retired at the same time. All the customers up there are thinking we have a problem, and so there's pressure. And one of my staff members said, hey, I got this call from a recruiter. I think that they can help us. And I had to kind of put my reputation on the line, and I just was like, you know what? I think I just want to keep trusting God to bring us the right person. And the next week, we got an application from some gal who was just absolutely perfect. She starts next week. Her name's Kristen. And so it's just, I don't know if that's character, but it's just that hey, that's an opportunity where I got to let God show up and let my staff see it, And so how cool is that? So.
Let me add one thing. Character is so important. You will fail. Back to failure. I have failed. I've dropped the ball with character. Again, go back to Scripture. I remember in some of my lowest points, I read Psalm 51. King David failed miserably. This is right after he had had his affair, he'd gotten called out on, and his response in humility was he fell on his knees before the Lord, said, give me a broken and contrite heart. It's not if it was works that you wanted, but he knew God didn't want the works. He wanted a broken and contrite heart. He really wanted David's heart. And so you will fail, you will screw up, you will have moments of shame, but I just remember, we've talked about when we've fallen before the Lord. I've certainly done that. It's biblical. As quickly as you can surrender it back to the Lord, give it back to him, he's picking you back up and you're on your way again. So as important as character is, there are moments of failure, and it's important how you respond, and God builds off of that.